Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Conrad Stump. I am the co-chair of the Horror Writers Association's Library Committee. I also work for the Springfield Greene County Library. And then I work with Becky Spratford on planning Librarians Day at SturgerCon and organizing the Summer Scare Summer Reading Initiative through the Horror Writers Association, which is what brings us here today. We are recording our adult panel for Summer Scares. Unfortunately, Emil Ferris is unable to join us today, but I'm so glad that we have Gabino Iglesias, the author of Coyote Songs, and Clay McLeod Chapman, the author of The Remaking. So welcome to both of you.
Hey!
It's good to see you. Yeah.
Good to see you, Conrad.
Thanks. So I want to start by just, giving you both some time to, introduce yourselves, talk a bit about your work, and then of course talk about your Summer Scares picks, and give us some more information on that. So whoever wants to start first.
You want to do paper, rock, scissors?
Let's go.
1, 2, 3. Shoot.
Oh, okay. I thought you were doing 3, not 4. Okay, let's go again. It's on 4. You're changing the rules,
we'll
man.
4. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right.
Oh, we got to do. Okay.
And then I get to choose.
Yeah.
I'll break the ice. How's that? I'll break the ice. Thank you for being here, for watching this thing, and if you're a librarian, for doing what you do. We certainly wouldn't be here without you. I also want to apologize in advance because I live in Austin. Almost never rains here, and today that I have to record this thing, we have a thunderstorm going on, so if I get interrupted by the windows rattling, I apologize for that. But it's awesome because it helps the mood of like horror and horror fiction, and there's a thunderstorm going on outside. In 2008, I moved to the US and I decided it'd be a good idea to switch my writing and start writing in English, which I didn't speak a word of until I was like 10 or 11. And then I learned how to do words in English from reading folks like H.P. Lovecraft, who's very problematic now, but this is back then when we didn't know about that, and Edgar Allan Poe and all of those fantastic dark writers. And soon I started realizing that the thing that worked best for me, that made me the happiest, was taking supernatural horror elements and just injecting those into my my crime fiction, because I like to talk about people and I like to talk about bad things happening to good people, because I'm just horrible as a human being like that. And that led to Zero Saints, that kind of very luckily for me took off, and people read it outside of my circle, which often means you get very negative reviews. That's a good thing if you're an author watching this. Once you start getting those 1-star reviews, that means that you're out of your circle of friends. So it's a good thing when people that you don't know start reading your work. And then after that came Coyote Songs, which is the pick for this year, and I'm super excited. Depending on where you're from or where you live, it's Coyote Songs, which is how I pronounce it. Is if you're in Texas, I've heard Coyote Songs and Coyote. So don't worry, there's no wrong way to pronounce that book. It is a novel, even though it's been nominated for awards as a short story collection. But there is a running line, a running thread that brings all of those things together. Heard it called a mosaic novel, which is what the publisher went with. And it's a book in which I wanted to really explore the same things that I was obsessed with when I wrote Zero Saints. I wanted to explore identity, migration, racism, bilingualism, syncretism, the power of magic in everyday life. So it's a little bit of magical realism. Since I'm working with a larger press now, I'm working with Mulholland for my next novel. If you're wondering where you should stack this thing, then I have 2 choices for you. The first one is you're very comfortable with recommending horror. So it is a story about mothers losing their kids. It is a story about a man who decomposes Bodies for a Living. That's based on the story of El Pozolero, who is a real life individual. It is a story about, a woman trying to overcome the pressures of being an Afro-Caribbean woman in the world of art. So it is horrific. So if you're very comfortable with putting it in the horror shelf, that's awesome, because I am very proud to fly that horror flag. But the marketing folks, my new place, have taught me the following. Sometimes you want to convince people who don't read horror of reading horror, so you tell them it's a thriller. So there's a lot of crime aspects in there that have nothing to do with the supernatural. So you can call it a thriller as well. And yeah, like I said, it's a very dark book, but it's also hopefully a book that shows you that there is hope, that when you go to some other country, or when you decide to learn English for some reason, or when you move to the US, or when you just migrate, wherever it is that you decide to go, there are very powerful reasons behind it. And those, sometimes they could be bad, political persecution, or you're running away from a life of crime. But in most cases, for most normal people, it is the fact that you're looking for something better. And at the core of the book is that thing. We're all looking for that other thing, not necessarily because we believe that the US has streets paved in gold, because we know that's not true. But I wouldn't be here talking to you. I wouldn't have a career as a writer if I had stayed back home, or I had kept writing in Spanish. So in a way, the book is also about that. And I hope you dig it if you have a chance to read it and have it in your shelves. Clay, they're all yours.
Thank you. Hey, I'm Clay. Thank you very much for having me out today, and thank you very much for tuning in. I've had a very humble existence, being able to tell a lot of different stories in a lot of different mediums. I've been fortunate to write books, children's books, comic books, film and TV, podcasts. It's led to this kind of very small island existence of being able to kind of tell these weird, creepy stories, and kind of branch out and find different formats and platforms and mediums in which to tell spooky stuff. Lately, I've been able to, I've published, God, my 10th book is going to come out in September with Quirk Books, and that's called Ghost Eaters. And Ghost Eaters is it's a supernatural story. And then the book before that, which just came out in paperback early this April, is called Whisper Down the Lane. And it's interesting, Gabino, because the publishers are trying to find that kind of similar duality of like, where does this book exist on the shelves? It exists in horror, but it also exists in that kind of thriller. The horror that you find over here kind of embeds itself a little bit more in the kind of psychology or in the mind, and therefore it becomes something other than horror, I have been told, which is this is a thriller, which for me it's just kind of I believe it's that kind of evolutionary mid-step where it is a book that is crawling out of the primordial ooze and still has its tail, still has its gills, still has its fins. It's both. It is the rap rock of horror and thriller. Awful. Let's say it's Run DMC Aerosmith rap rock, not like I'm not gonna go Korn, I'm not gonna go Slipknot. It is Run DMC Aerosmith style rap rock. Maybe Public Enemy, Anthrax, but yes, it's of that era. Whisper Down the Lane, which is all about the satanic panic of the 80s and how it kind of ripples out into our modern day climate. And that came out in April. But I'm here to talk about The Remaking, which is another spooky book. I think this would probably, I don't know. I mean, it's funny. Like it is, again, Gabino, it's like one of these things where like The Remaking is a fractured narrative it is technically a novel, but the novel kind of breaks down into these quarters, these separate sections. In essence, it's basically a ghost story told 4 different ways, and it changes and evolves as technology and the way that we tell stories evolves. So imagine the 1950s campfire story, imagine the kind of 70s schlocky, celluloid, saturated drive-in horror movie. Then imagine the kind of sleek, polished 90s remake of that 70s movie. And then imagine the kind of true crime podcast version of that story. So it's the snake literally biting its own tail, where the story just continues to grow and evolve and change as technology changes.
Very nice. Yeah. So you both touched on this a little bit, but I want to talk about libraries, since Summer Scares is designed sort of for librarians to help their patrons or to help their staff recommend horror titles to their patrons. So I am curious to know about the influence of libraries in your life, especially as a kid and growing up, and sort of how you developed your love of reading and how you fostered that, or how other people around you fostered your love of reading, but just the importance of books and libraries in your life growing up.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I'm gonna go. I'll do it. I'm going first this time. Damn it. It's amazing, and we had this conversation earlier in a previous interview where, like, I grew up in a single mother family, and my mom, she was a potter. She basically kind of like earned her living making artwork and like selling it at craft fairs, which meant she was always on the road, kind of traveling. And sometimes I went with her. A lot of the times I didn't, because I had school. Growing up, I had to live with my grandparents a lot of the time. And my grandmother, she would take me to the local library, the Bon Air Public Library. This is in Virginia. I grew up in Virginia. And she would, we would go in, and the rule was pick 2 books. Didn't matter which ones they were. She was surprisingly, not policing content, but more just kind of like as an elementary school kid, as a young boy, kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, she'd be like, just pick 2 books. I'll read one and you read one to yourself. And so I would pick, The Far Side or Calvin and Hobbes for me to read. And then she would, for the books that I would pick for her to read, I distinctly remember picking this one book called North America's Greatest Monsters. It was all about local folklore. It was all about the kind of the legends that were steeped within particular regions here in the country. And I mean, when I had that book, when I picked that book and my grandmother read it to me at night before bedtime, it did the trick. It like sunk into my psyche. I was forever, like that was all it took. Like I was damaged for life. To this day, The Wendigo is probably the most terrifying story, to the extent where like years later, I did that eBay search where I like hunted down North America's Greatest Monsters. It's been out of print since like, the 70s, but I found a copy, bought it for far more than it's probably worth. But to me, it was priceless because I could get that book back, and like, it was of that kind of like precursor to scary stories to tell in the dark, where, Alvin Schwartz and the illustrations by Stephen Gamble, I believe, like those images and those tales were just kind of like permanently kind of like etched into my psyche. So, thank God for my grandmother. Thank God for the library. Like that was the kind of the dam cracking.
Very nice. Yeah. What about you, Gabino?
I think that's awesome that you found a copy That's great.
It's still on the shelf. Like I still have it.
Of course it is. I'm surprised it's not like up on the wall in a little box.
I have to hide it from my kids. Like I'm just waiting for the day to spring it upon them. But we're not there yet. In time.
This sounds very sad, but it's not. It's just a reality. When I was growing up, there was not a lot of libraries around. My country is 100 miles long by 35 miles wide. So we had the library in Old San Juan, which was mostly for adult stuff, for people who are at the college level doing research. But my school had a typical, relatively small school, one long room with books all around, more or less at eye level and below. And I spent a lot of time in there. Not because I was in love with books already, but because some teachers did not know how to handle me. So it was more of a go spend some time there, just pick a book, get out of my face. And I was probably in 7th or 8th grade. And I would get sent there and I would just peruse and pick something up and start reading. One of the things that I think libraries do like no other place in the world is, if you want to get kids hooked on reading, let them read whatever appeals to them. Like if your kids it's into like gaming, so there are Roblox and Minecraft books. Make that the gateway drug and then get them hooked on everything else. And I was just moving around and I found a book whose title appealed to me. And it was Horacio Quiroga's Tales of Love, Madness, and Death. And I took it out and I read the first story and I was like, I have to take this home. And I took it home, and then a couple of weeks later, I brought it back and I took it out again and I read it again. And then I brought it back and I took it out again because no one wanted it. I think I did that about 6 or 7 times. And it's a book that changed my life. It was a book that taught me there's this thing that folks try to convince you is literature that you have to read. And this is this other thing that you can do with words, and you can create stories like this that give readers feelings like this. And this is the stuff that's keeping you glued to that book. And so that was the way that it changed my life. And then many years later, I was living in Austin. I was going to the library regularly at UT Austin. It has a great library system. And then I was working on I was working simultaneously on Zero Saints and on my dissertation, and things got a little rough, and I couldn't afford the internet. And that's when I realized, well, people complain that Blockbuster is gone, but you have a local library. People complain that, you have to keep buying coffee and pastries to stay at the local coffee shop. The library is dying to give you a whole bunch of services that you need to take advantage of. And I just spent about 2 years locked away in the Yarborough branch library of the Austin library system. And that's where I got done writing Zero Saints, writing my dissertation, writing Hungry Darkness, which is now out of print. And probably half of Coyote Songs was also written in there. So it was like rediscovering this entire world of stuff that it was just there. And if I couldn't, afford the $30 hardback that just came out, I could put it on my list and just wait for it and get it. So it was sort of like the closing of the, here's when I discovered literature. And many years later, this is me actually trying to make a living as an author and rediscovering the magic of libraries. And then this, which is the bonus, talking to librarians. Clay and I will be at Librarians Day in StokerCon, which is happening right now. So look us up and let's hang out. So yeah, that was about it.
I love it. Yes, thank you for the Librarians Day plug.
Yes.
and I love that. Like, right, there are so many great things to me, of course, about libraries, and I'm biased, obviously, but not everyone can afford to buy books, and that's okay. Some people can, or some people choose to, even though they can't afford to. I might fall into that. But if you get books from your library, if you ask your library to buy books, they will buy books, and that supports authors and publishers. So you don't have to buy books for your own collection in order to support authors and publishers. Support them through supporting your local library. So I love that. And then I was thinking too, you talked about school libraries, and I was thinking, when I was a kid, I didn't really go to the public library, but I went to the school library. And that was really important in my life because we moved a lot because my dad was in the Army, and, there was always a school library. And so that's where I spent a lot of time, and that's where I found my reading. And, Gabina, you also mentioned like parents letting kids read what they want, which is so important. And I think that's kind of what happened with me, is my parents didn't always like what I was reading necessarily, but they didn't really, police it. And they just let me do it as long as I was reading. And through reading, and even through reading horror, you learn about all these different things. Like Goosebumps has so many different things in it, which is what I grew up on. And so you kind of learn the stuff that you are supposed to learn about a little bit by reading this thing that you actually want to read. And then Clay, I really liked what you were saying about the folklore book. And that's something that I mentioned to library workers a lot, is like folklore is a great horror resource. And so there's always something in your town that has a horror element, whether it's, monsters or ghosts or, killers. Like there's always something that you can work with on that local level. So I love that. And yeah, I was thinking Jenny and the Green Ribbon, which is in one of those early reader books, just that image haunts me to this day. So
I love the oral tradition, and I feel like folklore kind of feeds into that. And having grown up in the South, where we're spinning yarns, and I feel like going to those books that kind of speaks specifically of the kind of the regional stories and tries to encapsulate those tales. Like I feel like those stories may be fading to a certain extent, and I feel like whatever puts the butterfly in the jar, so you can preserve it, look at it for posterity's sake. That's why I love the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books, and because they are in effect, they are folklore, just done with a terrifying illustration.
Most definitely. And then I wanted to talk to you guys about sort of, being writers, and how when you sort of realized that you wanted to be a writer, how you sort of began to foster that, and how you began to sort of navigate that professionally. So let's start with Gabino this time.
Oh man, do I have a story for you? I think about a week after I read that book for the first time, I started writing my own stories. And soon after, I had my first teacher who could actually truly maintain an entire conversation in English. And I knew that I wanted to read Stephen King, that I've heard about forever. And I wanted to read more horror. And it was only available in English, so I had to learn. And for her class, we did a project where we created a magazine to see, where our English stood. And I wrote this story about a mother in my neighborhood. At the time, I didn't know that you have to change names and all that stuff. A mother in our neighborhood who had this monstrous, deformed child, and she hides the child in the basement, and the child just grows and grows. Some pituitary gland issue, and he becomes a monster, and he breaks out and he kills half of the neighborhood. And then my parents were called into school to talk about the psychological angle of my little story. And everybody was just so worried and so angry and so shocked. And they sat there, and I sat there with my dad after school, and they did their whole spiel about blood and gore and killing my fellow classmates. Which I know they were doing their job, and things have gotten worse. So if you have kids right now killing their fellow classmates in stories, you should probably look into that. But at the end of that thing, my dad looked at the woman and he said, "Okay, I see that, but was it well written?" And at that moment, I realized, no, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. I want to write stories that make people feel things and that people react to. And I did not know how publishing worked. I'm not sure I know how publishing works now, but at the time I knew even less. But that was the moment. This is what I want to do the rest of my life. I want people to read my stuff and laugh or cry or get nauseous. I want them to have some sort of visceral reaction. because if I can write a very short story about a kid devouring half a neighborhood and get this type of reaction, imagine what else I can do. And I was hooked. I was just, I'm still going, still trying to do that.
Very
Wait,
nice.
there was a second part of the question?
Oh,
No,
yeah,
I'm
well,
thinking-
a little bit. Yeah. I mean, so I asked about like how you started to navigate writing professionally, but you did sort of answer it. So
Oh, yes. No, when I started professionally, I made all of the mistakes in the world. I worked with editors who changed my work and didn't tell me about it. I sent out stories for free or for anthologies that said payment is a PDF or ebook copy of the anthology. Now I do a lot on social media to tell writers that I know you're desperate to see your name in print, but sometimes waiting is the best thing that you can do. So you want to do that. You don't want to, for example, pay to get read. So submission fees are not a thing that I believe in. They're just elitist moves that make sure that they keep people who can't afford it away. I started doing that, and then I spent about 2 years collecting about 200, 250 agent rejections with my first novel. And then I saw a call for strange, bizarro novels put out by Eraserhead Press. They have a series called the New Bizarro Author Series, and they pick between 6 and 8 books every year. They put them out, and they just literally hand you a book, and they say, let's go see what you can do, and maybe we'll publish some more of your work in the future. And then I learned that you have to go out, you have to make more noise than everybody else. You have to navigate live readings, social media, and try to make as much noise as possible. And then the rest of it happened. And since October 2020, when I signed with my agent, it was like I knew a lot about how indie publishing works, and I understood its problems and how, lack of marketing budgets and the lack of distribution hurts a lot of these indie books that are truly gems. There are absolutely gems in indie publishing. Indie publishing must be supported and defended and protected at all costs. And then since October 2020, it's been like, well, this is how we work now. Like, we reach out to libraries. We send out galleys to booksellers because they can make a difference. So I'm just taking notes since October of 2020 and trying to learn how to re-navigate the whole thing.
yeah.
This book made a lot of noise, but mostly because it was nominated for things. And then you ride that wave of free marketing and it lands on more radars. But it wasn't, my publisher doesn't even have a website. So it's that level of, DIY type of publishing without being self-publishing. So I keep learning. I take notes every day. I see how people do things. And I don't think if anybody tells you they're an expert at publishing, move away from that person. No one knows what's up. So that includes me.
Well, and I love that because, libraries are all about lifelong learning and knowing that you don't know it all, and we're here to help you sort of figure things out. So, having that perspective of just like every day you learn something new and it's all part of this journey is great. So what about you, Clay? How did you first figure out that you wanted to become a writer?
Well, it's I guess my origin story is I was a terrible student. Like I couldn't, process information in a way that was applicable to a classroom environment. And that was like very evident from an early age. If there's a window, my attention went out it. Couldn't play sports, couldn't play a musical instrument. I am an only child. I had a lot of time on my hands, and I was I lived in an internal existence, and my grades were plummeting. And so it took my 6th grade English teacher to pull me aside one day after class and say, Clay, I like you, but you're going to be in my class next year if you don't do something to, bulk up your grade. So she struck a deal with me. Where she said, there was a statewide writing contest And she said, if you enter this contest, I'll give you some extra credit and we'll bump up that grade, just a nudge. And I had never really written before, never really thought about writing before. Like it seemed like a means to an end, to be completely frank. But I realized the more times I enter this contest, the more extra credit I would get. So I just wrote like all of these stories, just kind of like flooded the market for submissions. And I got the extra credit and I passed 6th grade. And I was like, this is it, I'm done, you know, hello 7th grade. But then that summer, I get this letter in the mail saying, congratulations, your story has been selected. And it was just like a moment of like, what? Like, what do you mean? And I like it just kind of recalibrated my understanding of what I had done. So I just kept entering that contest year after year after year, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th, you know, like all the way up till, you know, 12th grade, where they were like, finally, like, you're cut off, go to college, do something else with yourself, man. But it kind of led to my discovery that like, oh my God, I love telling stories. And in particular, I love telling first person narratives. I loved theater and performance. There was like this kind of internal ham to my life. I loved creating characters. I loved, you know, I found Stephen King, which made me find Edgar Allan Poe, which made me find H.P. Lovecraft, which made me find that there are certain narratives. I think of survival type. You could basically write short stories that all take place within a first person narrative, where it's essentially a character telling their story to you, the reader, the audience. And, you know, it basically brings you into the experience. And I loved first person narrative. I loved the idea that me as the author, me as the reader, the writer, I could reach out to an audience and bring them into the fold as a narrator. I just loved that. So for years, all I ever did was write these bizarro short stories, like kind of Faulkner, like, you know, Flannery O'Connor on meth, just like going like just weird Southern Gothic, like monstrosities, but all from the perspective of the narrator, the first person narrative. And like this lasted through college. Like I just adding up a kitty of short stories until finally spring break of senior year, I'm about to graduate. And, you know, I have that kind of sit down with my mom and basically kind of like, what are you going to do now that the real world is coming? And I was like, Mom, I want to be a writer. Like, I think I want to do it. And she was like, how do you do that? And I said, I don't know. And it was the moment, that was the panic attack hit. And it was just like, how do you make this like, I had been doing it, but I didn't know how to like make how do you exist doing this? And so I freaked out. And basically like, I what I did, the choice that I made was I camped out at the local Barnes and Noble, and I found that book, that The Writer's Market. Like that like this was not pre-internet, but kind of like early-ish enough that like you still look for the book rather than the website. And I basically sat down with The Writer's Market and flipped through until I found, like, I made a list. Like, I didn't buy the book, you know, but I basically like just kind of like sat in the aisle and just like wrote down all the names and addresses of every literary agent who I thought might be interested in what I had to offer. And I snail mailed them a copy of a short story with a cover letter, basically begging them, like, please, please, please read this story. And if you like that, there's a lot more where that came from. And I think it was like 30 agents. 29 of them wrote back and said, thanks, but no thanks, kid. One of them wrote back. This is a true story. One of them wrote back and said, yeah, I'll check this out. And she said, she was like, give me 4 more stories. And so I gave her 4 more stories. And she was like, after that, she was like, give me more stories. And I was like, how many more? And she was like, all of them. And I was like, are you ready? And I sent her 70 short stories. I don't know if she read them all, but I sent them to her. And she was like, I can work with this. And you know, it was this agent. I don't know how she did it. And I was 21, maybe 20. And basically 3 weeks after establishing contact with this one agent, she got me a 2-book contract with Disney, with their publishing branch, Hyperion. And my first book was a collection of short stories called Rest Area. And Rest Area was essentially 20 short stories of my childhood, like they basically they published 20 of those things that I had been spending my Friday nights not going to parties writing, and you know, it made its way onto the shelf and nobody read it, and it kind of died on the vine, and it was the best experience and the most painful experience, because what I learned was there's the insurmountable hurdle of like getting the deal or getting your book into people's hands. Then there's the other hurdle that I don't think a lot of people talk about, which is like, how do you get people to read your book? Like, how do you get people to know what you're writing? And you know, they like, everybody took a chance on me, and it was such a Cinderella story. And I got 2 books. My next book was a novel. Nobody read that novel. Maybe no one should read that novel, but that novel made its way to the shelves. And then I was in writer's jail for years. Nobody wanted to publish me because now I had a track record. Now, you know, regardless of what you want to say about the quality of the material itself, like, it was just like, you know, it became one of those things where like I couldn't convince anybody to read my stuff because I had this like scarlet letter sales tally on my chest. And it took time to kind of like, you know, retroactively learn, you know, lick my wounds and learn that like this business is tough, and you have to kind of build your readership. So I started. That's when I just learned I say yes to everything, any opportunity that comes my way. And I've been very, very fortunate where, you know, someone will say, hey, have you ever thought about writing comics? No, but now I am. You know, do you want to write for children? Do you want to write for younger readers? Do you want to write musicals? Do you want to write for film? Like I learn fast. I adapt my voice for other mediums and for other audiences. And it has kind of allowed me to cut my teeth and learn what's most important to me in terms of like the stories that I want to tell. It also allows me to kind of find my voice in other opportunities or other platforms, which is really interesting. But yeah, it's been a slow crawl back into the publishing world. But I guess, like, you know, to answer your question of like how to navigate it, you know, there's so many peaks and valleys. Like, I have been so fortunate to fail within this industry. We you know, I think longevity and stamina and sustaining a career, like if you can find a publisher who is committed to sustainability, that is a miracle. That is something that I feel like doesn't happen, because you have your one shot, and then if that shot doesn't hit its target, you're like, I think you're gone. And that's terrifying. I think of like, the best way that I can kind of attribute it is I think of bands. And some of my favorite bands started off as like indie rock or punk rock bands that like weren't signed to major labels, but they like either released it themselves or on like independent labels. And that's where they build their base, their fandom. And then maybe there's a moment where they like sign to a major label, and the fandom will either follow them or they won't. The band will hopefully evolve. The band will, sometimes the band won't hit that mark or that target. So they recede back to either the independent, or it's like you have to find the platform or find the foundation that works best for your music, your band and your fandom, your listeners. And sometimes that's going to be the majors. Sometimes that's not. Sometimes it's releasing it yourself, publishing it yourself. But like, you find your readership, and it could be 5 people, 500 people, 5,000 people. But it's like, I would rather have 10 people who want to read my stuff than 100 people who don't. or like maybe they're like, it's like the apathy read or the apathy listen, like, I don't know. I'm losing I'm in the weeds now, but like I just feel like there's something to be said about like, who is your readership? Who is your like, who wants to listen to your band? And that might be a gazillion people.
Yeah.
It might be 10 people, but those 10 people will make the shirts. They will make the patches. They will have your bumper sticker on the back of. I want a Coyote Songs bumper sticker on the back of my car, frankly.
Nice.
Like that's what I want. Because I'm a fan. That's the difference.
Yeah.
I am a fan.
I was going to say, yeah, I also was a terrible student as a child, just because like my mind was not there. I was not interested. And, when you get older, you're kind of like, that's okay. You realize that it doesn't equate intelligence. So what you were saying made me think a lot about getting older, and how, like, when you're 20, you're so concerned about your timeline and how it stacks up to everyone else's timeline. But like, from the vantage point of 20 years later, it's like, just be patient with life. So it'll get better. It'll work itself out, and you'll find out who you are and, what you want to do and how to do it. So I think just patience and being less concerned with what other people are doing is a good way to go about it.
Long game. We got to be like nothing but the long game.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you both about horror, of course, because that's why we're here. So I am curious to know, like, why, what attracts you to horror, and why do you like to write about it? And, what do you think that it offers readers that maybe other things don't? Like, what's unique about it for what it offers readers? And we'll start with Clay this time.
Okay, it's an interesting question, and I think like you ask 100 people, you're going to get 100 different answers. Mm-hmm. I will say specifically to me, what horror means to me, and writing it, and reading it, and watching it, and imbibing it is, I was exposed to it probably at an age where it was probably not, like, I wasn't necessarily ready for it, but what I also kind of, I feel like I don't want to get pop psychology here because I'm going to do it incorrectly, but like, I feel like there was a moment in my childhood where things weren't working out. I'm gonna call it trauma. I'm gonna say that, like, you have your core family dynamics, and sometimes that's disrupted, and it can lead to you need something. And I found at an early age what I needed was horror. And it was it was like watching a horror movie or reading Stephen King provided a contained, finite environment, the scope of a movie or the scope of these pages. It provided me a space, a safe space, to either re-experience traumas or exorcise trauma. And it was very freeing, like releasing of these fears, which seems oddly counterintuitive. Like, why would you scare yourself with a movie if you're scared in your personal life? But for me, like, it felt compulsive at a certain point. Like, I wanted to find more more horror to kind of experience it. And I think when we always talk about the roller coaster experience, the metaphor of, like, horror is like riding a roller coaster. It's a safe way to kind of like have that kind of death impulse or that fear impulse. And I agree, like, you feel your heartbeat pick up and the adrenaline pick up. But, like, there's something to be said about the give and take of reading something or watching something where, like, I am being asked by a novel or a short story to meet the author halfway. I have to bring my imagination to the plate and or the table and basically manifest the kind of the negative space of that story within that story. And that's me, that kind of give and take, or that kind of like participatory aspect to fiction is astounding. And when a writer or a filmmaker kind of hits its mark, when you then take that story with you and you carry it and hold on to it for the rest of your life, those are the best horror. Like, I mentioned Survivor Type earlier, that amazing Stephen King story where it's like the doctor who essentially cannibalizes himself, on the desert island. Like, I read that in the 7th grade in Mrs. Wren's English class during study hall when I should have probably been doing something else, but it's still there. Like, it's still, like, the moment I read it, the age I read it, the person I was when I read it, like that is now baked into the experience, the reading experience, to the extent where, God, if I could do that for somebody, one person, all that's phenomenal. We exercise these traumas by writing them out of our system in hopes that maybe they will provide something similar for someone on the other end. That's my kind of 2 cents on it.
Yeah, I like it. I like what you were saying about it being a safe space to explore trauma. And I think that's what I really like about horror, especially for kids. It's like the safe space to explore what's scary in the world. And so, you can sort of face these fears and you can see people overcome these fears in the sort of contained environment. So even if you don't recognize that that's kind of what's going on, it's helping you. So yeah. What about you, Gabino? What do you love about horror?
All of it. I think Clay said something brilliant about asking this question to 100 people, and I'll take it further. I think if you take the same 100 people and you ask them the same question a month after that initial interview, they might give you 50% of the same answer, and the other half is going to change. Like, they've been thinking some other stuff. They've been writing some other stuff. Clay was talking about trauma. I was thinking about a scene in the next book, The Devil Takes You Home, where there's a racist encounter at a barbecue joint. And then when they stepped outside, sometimes racists mess with the wrong person. And this guy gets his teeth knocked out. And I was thinking, yes, it's rough. Yes, it's bloody. Yes, it's violent. There's some language in that scene. But I felt so good after writing it, because in this day and age, I get racist slurs online. So the physical aspect of, like, justice. Let me get this off my chest. It doesn't exist anymore, but it exists on the page. So agreed on the trauma. For me, horror only works if there's empathy. So if you don't feel empathy for those characters, the worst thing could happen, and it's not an effective narrative. So horror teaches us to like care about people. We talked about what I like to call controlled chaos. I can't turn off the news or global warming or the pandemic or poverty, or I can't control any of that. And so I can come here, open up Clay's book, and then when it gets to be too much, I enjoyed the adrenaline and the thrill ride, and I can be like, all right, I'm gonna go make me a sandwich. And then I close the book. And even though I take the feelings and the ideas, it's controlled. I decide when it starts, how far I take it, when I put it away. And I think horror does that so well. It's like you can carry it in your backpack and fly away to a very bad place, and then come back and you know, go to the park and listen to children laughing, and you're like, all right, everything is more or less all right with the world. I can go now home and enter that horrible narrative about death and mayhem and ghosts and zombies and poverty, or whatever the story is that you're reading at the time. And all of those things happen in horror, and all of us sort of like navigate one today, and then we go through another one tomorrow. I don't think a single horror writer writes about their trauma every single day, or racism, or, you know, childhood experiences. Sometimes we forget all of that part and we go, this is the most, when done well, the most entertaining, thrilling genre there is. We're going to go full-blown entertainment today. And then you get this balls to the wall, crazy, otherworldly narratives. I mentioned in our previous event that horror is the best dancing partner. Life is horrific, so it doesn't matter what type of genre you like, you can probably mix in a little bit of horror. And lastly, we can't define it. Like I can say werewolf, ghost, witch, alien, cattle mutilation, and for some people that would be horror. And some other folks will be like, you know, abuse, poverty, cancer. Those things scare the living crap out of me. The other stuff is just like watching cartoons. So we can never nail it down. And I think that for writers, the fun of accepting that the genre that we work in, that we're considered experts in, is sort of like a floating signifier, like refuses to be pinned down. It keeps us coming back for more every single day. Like, what am I going to do today? Am I going to deal with my trauma, entertain, dance with sci-fi or romance? Am I going to, you know, step in the boundaries and create a new monster? Am I going to do social commentary? Like, I'm going to do all of it, just not on the same day. And maybe you do it on the same day. And that's what makes horror so absolutely great. It just keeps going.
Yeah, that's a super cool way of looking at it. There's so much that you can do with it, so many things you can explore or approach it, or, you know, it's just, it can be different every single time. And I like that a whole lot. So speaking of horror, and you both mentioned Stephen King, but I want to talk to you about who is out there right now who you really enjoy, who you think more people should know about. And, you know, if you have it like a book that you read recently that was just like, whoa. And let's see, let's start with Gabino.
Awesome. I'll try not to keep it too long. Genre fiction versus literary fiction. For some reason, in the year 2022, the year of our Lord 22, I still hear that debate. And usually my answer is, you just told me that you've never read Brian Evenson without telling me that you've never read Brian Evenson, because the man has a Guggenheim Fellowship. Go read Brian Evenson. Do you need a place to start? Start with a collection, either A Collapse of Horses or The Burning Glassy Floor of Hell. Like, he is an absolute master no matter what he does. And every single short story collection by Brian Evenson has noir, literary fiction, sci-fi, horror, something in between. So it's a perfect place to start. Stephen Graham Jones is one of our current masters. There's nothing that he cannot do. And at the same time, he's telling you about Native American life, life outside of a reservation, interracial stuff. So he's tackling all of it on every single angle. Paul Tremblay is probably the absolute king of uncertainty. One thing that we immediately think about when we talk about horror, we think about fear. Paul has this uncertainty. You never know what's real, what isn't. He keeps you confused, and I absolutely love that. Eric Larocca, he's probably the future superstar. No one sounds like him, and for him to come out with so many books, he's so prolific. He has like 6 coming this year. I don't know. Sina Pelayo is a super amazing writer. And I think she's also part of that wave of the future. Adam Caesar started out as a horror, cannibal, weird, and now he's the king of YA horror. So he transitioned very well. So go read Adam Caesar. Haley Piper is also super prolific, and her work is absolutely amazing. And I'm gonna leave it there because I said I was gonna keep it short.
Yeah, I was thinking about Eric LaRocca and Haley Piper. I like them a whole lot.
Awesome.
Yeah. What about you, Clay? Who are you liking right now?
I feel like Gabino just stole my reading list, but I've been reading. There are a few books that I really want to kind of name check. I read Sarah Langen's Good Neighbors.
Oh God, yes.
That was probably one of, if not my favorite books of last year. That like it's still with me. I recently read Rachel Eve Moulton's new novel, which is called The Volt Sisters, but that doesn't come out till next year. But I want to name check her previous novel, which was called Tinfoil Butterfly.
Excellent.
It's a really beautiful book. There is a middle grade novel called Ghost Girl by Ali. Oh God, Ali, I'm going to murder your name and you're going to hate me for this. Malinenko, Ali Malinenko, Ghost Girl. I would really recommend that one, even for adults. Like I think it's such a beautiful. I don't know. It's a really spooky one. So that gets my thumbs up. And then I feel like Megan Abbott's The Turnout was so great. Like that was such a good one. I've been on a fungal horror kick lately. So T. Kingfisher has a new book coming up pretty soon called What Moves the Dead, which is really awesome. I would totally wholeheartedly recommend that one. And then what am I gonna do? He's a friend, but I have to name drop him. Nat Cassidy, his new novel called Mary. You should definitely check out Mary when it comes out in July on Tor Nightfire. Just read Tor Nightfire. Like basically, like that's like you just got to read Tor Nightfire. That's my
I support that. So yes, we're about out of time. So I want to ask one last question. You both have new books coming out this year. So mention your book, when it comes out, and how people can find you on the interwebs. And we'll start with Clay.
We're waiting for you to tell us.
Yeah.
Okay. So Ghost Eaters. Ghost Eaters is my next novel, and it's from Quirk Books, and it comes out September 20th, 2022. And it's a spooky book, and I would wholeheartedly recommend it. I might be a little biased, but I think it's pretty fun and spooky. And you can find it anywhere where books are sold. However you purchase books, support your local independent bookstore. But yeah, it'll be out here in the fall, so just in time for spooky season. But you can find me I'm on Twitter, on Instagram. I'm very Googleable. But yeah, it's Clay McLeod at Clay McLeod at anything. So I'm out there.
Lovely, lovely. What about you, Gabino?
Well, Clay is totally biased, but I'm not because I didn't write Ghost Eaters. But I know some people, so I already read it, and it is awesome, and you definitely want to check it out. And that is completely unbiased opinion. Last time we did a thing, I didn't have it, so today I remembered to bring it because the next one is The Devil Takes You Home, out from Mulholland. See, I'm a professional. Out August 2nd from Mulholland Books, and yes. Clay just said it. Please, if you don't have a local indie, which I know is a situation, not everybody has a library that they can go to within like 1 or 2 or 3 miles, and not a lot of people. A lot of people don't live in towns where it's like I'm gonna go grab a taco or coffee and then drop by my local indie. Bookshop.org not only sends you the book, it's also a place that sends love and money to indie bookstores. Any indie bookstore still alive after the pandemic, after they were forced to be shut down for so long, I assure you, none of them were making millions before the pandemic. So any indie bookstore that you know of right now can probably use your support. Pre-orders are super important. Because they tell my boss that it's a good investment, that you support Latinx books, that you understand the importance of diversity and representation and inclusion in fiction, and you can get it anywhere else. Because if you don't have a local indie and you have to drive 250 miles, and you're not a fan of Bookshop, the internet is your best bet. And then. In most places, there was apparently someone named Gabino Iglesias who looks like a little egg and hasn't been on social media for about 12 years. But it's Gabino_Iglesias. I'm sorry about the underscore. I know it's a pain, but it's what I had to do. So come find me. I'm on Twitter talking books or insulting Ted Cruz or just having fun. So always happy to connect with book people.
Very nice. Spectacular. Real quick to the librarians who are watching this, I just want to say thank you. And if you have any questions about summer scares, feel free to contact me and Becky Spradford at libraries@horror.org. You'll get both of us and one of us will get back to you. Clay, Gabino, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this, and enjoy your day.
You too.
It's spooky, guys.